The United States is not the only place with the luxury of having white supremacy or racial stratification. This is Brazil, a close neighbor to ours. And here I've taken the data from 1872 to 2010, which is the data we have to work with. And I've constructed them in racial categories based on the systems they use in Brazil in 2010. And so then I went through every year, I took the racial classifications and I put them in groups that matched the groups that I wanted to have them in, whether they were black, brown, white, Asian, and I put them in their group from 1872 up until 2010. Where they didn't have the data for it, I estimated it between the 2 years and made it nice and smooth, because we like nice and smooth too. Or we like to really have the jerks in demography. We like to look at trends. And so I calculated my index of racial diversity for this population as well. And you will see. And part of what happened in Brazil that is very interesting to me and very important for us. It gives us another example of the changing construction of race. So Brazil is now a majority black country. How did Brazil become a majority black country? Brazil did not become a majority black country because black people have more babies than white people in Brazil. Let me say that another way, probably more precise. Brazil did not become a population in which the majority are classified as black because the population classified as black had more babies than the population classified as white. Right? Could have said the same thing about Colombia. They had this move as well, but not the majority, but a dramatic rise in the population classified as black. Same thing in Ecuador, same thing in Peru. Why did it? And then Mexico, you see the last census in Mexico, they added a racial classification. So what's going on in those spaces? What's going on in those spaces is a reconsideration of what race means and who is what. A reconsideration about what it means to be black, what it means to claim an African ancestry, what it means to claim to be part of the African diaspora, which it is virtually impossible not to be. Now, South Africa for me is always a very cherished example. And South Africa is probably different than Brazil because the rise in the percentage of the population that is black, the rise of the percentage of the population that is classified as black is a result of more births going to the population that is classified as black. Now, the population being classified as black is new. I remember when I first started collaborating with people at the Census Bureau in South Africa, and they were having a big debate on what to do with racial classification. Then it's in South Africa, we gotta have racial classification, but how do we introduce racial classification? Well, first they had to amend the new census, and then they had to amend the policies about continuing to collect racial data, because they had a very immediate experience with using those classifications to exploit and directly prohibit people from participating equally in the society. So that had to change. But in changing it, they found that they were not able to even recognize some of the problems they wanted to change unless they had this data. And so they reintroduced the data. And in order to get some of the data, some of these estimates, even for South Africa, I had to make very creative choices about who was what. Okay? So I had to say, if a person is Zulu, then they are black. If a person is something else, then they are black. I had to make those decisions, and I had to do the classifications based on that. Not because that was the most salient thing about their identity at that moment in South Africa, because at that moment in South Africa, the population which is classified as Zulu was in great conflict with the ANC and the majority population in South Africa based on other issues. So you can see that the index of racial diversity is going down in South Africa and is being driven by differential rates of increase based on the classification of the different populations.